Hello friends, in this video we are going to read the chapter 2 of the book Certificate Physical and Human Geography. So in the previous video we have read the chapter 1. If you want to read that one, then you can go on the channel homepage and you can find it. So let's start. Chapter 2. The title is The Earth's Crust. The structure of the earth in order to understand the geography of the external landforms of the earth. It is essential that we have some idea of what lies within the Earth's crust. It is not possible to know exactly how the Earth was formed about 4,500 million years ago. But from the evidence of volcanic eruptions, earthquake waves, deep mine operations, and crustal borings, the following facts are quite clear. There is a picture. The Earth is made up of several concentric layers. The outer layer is the Earth's crust, the lithosphere, which comprises two distinct parts. The upper part consists of granitic rocks and forms the continents. Its main mineral constituents are silica and alumina, so it is collectively referred to as the Sial. It has an average density of 2.7. The lower part is a continuous zone of denser basaltic rocks, forming the ocean floors, comprising mainly silica, iron, and magnesium. It is therefore called SEMA and has an average density of 3. The Sial and the SEMA together form the Earth's crust, which varies in thickness from only 3 to 4 miles beneath the oceans to as much as 30 miles under some parts of the continents. Since the Sial is lighter than the SEMA, the continents can be said to be floating on a sea of denser SEMA. This is illustrated in figure 16. Immediately beneath the crust or lithosphere is the mantle or mesosphere, about 1800 miles thick, composed mainly of very dense rocks rich in olivine. The interior layer is the core or barysphere, 2160 miles in radius and is made up of mainly of iron with some nickel and is called Nephe. The temperature here is estimated to be as high as 3500 degree Fahrenheit, and the core is subject to extremely high pressure. There is a picture. Now, under such conditions, the core could be expected to be in a liquid state, but recent studies through earthquake waves have suggested that the innermost part of the core is probably a crystalline or solid mass. Parts of the Earth's crust are immersed by oceans and seas. These form the hydrosphere, extending skywards for over 15 miles. The Earth is enveloped by a mass of gases which make up the atmosphere. Now we will discuss the classification of rocks. The Earth's crust is made up of various types of rocks, differing from one another in texture, structure, color, permeability, mode of occurrence, and degree of resistance to denudation. A knowledge of these rocks is of paramount importance to geologists who study the composition and physical history of the earth. But the geographer too needs a basic knowledge of the most common rocks and their relationship with landforms. Rocks also form the basis for soil and determine to some extent the type of natural vegetation and land use. So we must have a fair acquaintance with the rocks around us. Generally speaking, all rocks may be classified into three major groups: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic, according to their origin and appearance. Now we are going to discuss igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are formed by the cooling and solidification of molten rock, that is, magma, from beneath the Earth's crust. They are normally crystalline in structure. They do not occur in strata, means layers, nor do they contain fossils. Igneous rocks may be subdivided on the basis of mineral composition. When they contain a high proportion of silica, they are said to be acid. Acid igneous rocks, such as granite, are less dense and are lighter in color than basic rocks. These contain a greater proportion of basic oxides, example of iron, aluminum, or magnesium, and are thus denser and darker in color. In terms of origin, there are two main classes of igneous rocks. The first one is plutonic rocks. These are igneous rocks formed at some depth in the Earth's crust. They have cooled and solidified slowly so that large, easily recognized crystals have been able to form. These intrusive rocks, such as granite, diorite, and gabbro, are exposed at the surface by the processes of denudation and erosion. The second one is volcanic rocks. These are molten rocks poured out of volcanoes as lavas. They solidify rapidly on the Earth's surface and the crystals are small. Basalt is a common volcanic or extrusive rock and forms lava flows, lava seeds, and lava plateaus. Example, those of Antrim in northern Ireland, the Deccan Plateau in India, and the Columbia Snake Plateau in USA. Some kinds of basalt solidify in a very peculiar manner to form long polygonal columns. A well-known example in the columnar basalt of the Giant's Causeway in Antrim. Some of the molten lava may push its way to the surface through clefts and passages, solidifying as vertical dikes or horizontal sills. Their origin and occurrence will be discussed in greater detail in Chapter 3. Most igneous rocks are extremely hard and resistant. For this reason, they are quarried for road making and polished as monuments and gravestones. Now we are going to discuss sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are formed from sediment accumulated over long periods, usually underwater. They are distinguished from the other rock types in their characteristic layer formation and are termed stratified rocks. The strata may vary in thickness from a few inches to many feet. The rocks may be coarse or fine grained, soft or hard. The materials that form sedimentary rocks may be brought by streams, glaciers, winds, or even animals. They are non crystalline and often contain fossils of animals, plants, and other microorganisms. Sedimentary rocks are thus the most varied in their formation of all rocks. Sedimentary rocks are classified according to their age, and different kinds of rocks formed during the same period are grouped together. It is more useful to know the characteristics of the various kinds of rocks. Sedimentary rocks may be classified under three major categories in accordance with their origin and composition. First one is mechanically formed sedimentary rocks. These rocks have been formed from the accumulation of materials derived from other rocks, which have been cemented together. Sandstones are probably the most familiar sedimentary rocks. They are made from sand grains, often quartz fragments derived from granites. Their texture, composition, and color vary tremendously. Many types of sandstones have been quarried for building purposes or for making grindstones. A coarser type of sandstone is known as grit. When larger pebbles are firmly cemented to form a rock, it is called conglomerate. When the pebbles are rounded, or breccia when the fragments are angular. The finer sedimentary materials form clay, widely used for brick making, shale, or mudstone. Sand and gravel may occur in uncemented form. The second one is organically formed sedimentary rocks. These rocks are formed from the remains of living organisms such as corals or shellfish, whose fleshy parts have been decomposed, leaving behind the hard shells. The most common rocks formed in this way are of the calcareous type. They include limestones and chalk. The carbonaceous rocks are also organically formed but from vegetative matter, swamps and forests. The pressure of overlying sediments has compressed the plant remains into compact masses of carbon, which eventually become peat, lignite, or coal, all of which bear great economic value. The third one is chemically formed sedimentary rocks. Such rocks are precipitated chemically from solutions of one kind or another. Rock salts are derived from strata which once formed the beds of seas or lakes. Gypsum or calcium sulfate is obtained from the evaporation of salt lakes such as the Dead Sea, which have a very high salinity. In similar ways, potash and nitrates may be formed. Now we are going to discuss metamorphic rocks. All rocks, whether igneous or sedimentary, may become metamorphic or change rocks under great heat and pressure. Their original character and appearance may be greatly altered by such forces, particularly during intense earth movements. In this manner, clay may be metamorphosed into slate, limestone into marble, sandstone into quartzite, granite into gneiss, shell into schist, and coal into graphite. There is a picture you can see. Now we are going to discuss the influence of rock types on landscape. The appearance and characteristic features of landforms are greatly influenced by the underlying rock type. Softer rocks like clay and shale are worn down much faster than harder rocks like granite, Within West Malaysia, the resistance granites form the high ground of the main range and the eastern range, where several peaks rise to over 2000 feet. The landscape is one of the smooth slopes and rounded hilltops. The highest peak in West Malaysia, Gunung Tahan, that is 7186 feet, is composed of even more resistant quartzite. Shells, schist, and sandstones, being less resistant, form the much lower rounded hills. Recent river sediments form flat plains. The limestones, resistant because of their permeability, form prominent steep sided hills such as those near Ipoh and in Perlis. Now we are going to discuss the Earth's movements and the major landforms. The face of the Earth is constantly being reshaped by the change of denudation. Running water, rain, frost, sun, wind, glaciers, and waves. So that our present landforms are very varied and diverse. But these agents only modify the pattern of mountains, plateaus, and plains which have been modeled by movements of the Earth's crust. Since the dawn of geological time, no less than 9 orogenic or mountain building movements have taken place. Folding and fracturing the Earth's crust, some of them occurred in pre-Cambrian times between 600 to 3500 million years ago. The three more recent orogenics are the Caledonian, Hercynian, and Alpine. The Caledonian, about 320 million years ago, raised the mountains of Scandinavia and Scotland and is represented in North America. These ancient mountains have been worn down and no longer exhibit the striking forms that they must once have had. In the later period, during the Hercynian earth movements about 240 million years ago, were formed such ranges as the Ural Mountains, the Pennines, the Welsh Highlands in Britain, the Harz Mountains in Germany, the Appalachians in America, as well as the high plateaus of Siberia and China. These mountains have also been reduced in size by the various sculpturing forces. We are now living in an era very close to the last of the major orogenic movements of the earth. The Alpine, about 30 million years ago, young fold mountain ranges were buckled up and overthrust on a gigantic scale. Being the most recently formed, these ranges, such as the Alps, Himalayas, Andes, and Rockies, shown in figure 17, are the loftiest and the most imposing. Their peaks are sometimes several miles high, but the time will come when these lofty ranges will be lowered like those that existed before them. From the eroded materials, new rocks will be formed later to be uplifted to form the next generation of mountains. Now we are going to discuss the types of mountains. Mountains make up a large proportion of the Earth's surface. Based on their mode of formation, four main types of mountains can be distinguished. The first one is fold mountains. These mountains are by far the most widespread and also the most important. They are caused by large-scale earth movements when stresses are set up in the Earth's crust. Such stresses may be due to the increased load of the overlying rocks, flow movements in the mantle, magmatic intrusions into the crust, or the expansion or contraction of some part of the earth. When such stresses are initiated, the rocks are subjected to compressive forces that produce wrinkling or folding along the lines of weakness. As illustrated in figure 18a and b, folding effectively shortens the Earth's crust, creating from the original level surface a series of waves. The upfolded waves are called anticlines and the troughs or downfolds are synclines. You can see here the figure. The formation of up and down folds closely resembles that of the wrinkles of a tablecloth when it is pushed from either one or both sides of the table. In the great fold mountains of the world, such as the Himalayas, Rockies, Andes, and the Alps, due to the complexity of the compressional forces, the folds develop much more complicated forms. When the crest of a fold is pushed too far, an overfold is formed. That is in figure 19, you can see here. If it is pushed still further, it becomes a recumbent fold. In extreme cases, fractures may occur in the crust, so that the upper part of the recumbent fold slides forward over the lower part along a thrust plane, forming an overthrust fold. The overriding portion of the thrust fold is termed a nape. Since the rock strata have been elevated to great heights, sometimes measurable in miles, fold mountains may be called mountains of elevation. The fold mountains are also closely associated with volcanic activity. They contain many active volcanoes, especially in the circum-Pacific fold mountain system. They also contain rich mineral resources such as tin, copper, gold, and petroleum. And there is a figure. The second one is block mountains. When the earth's crust bends, folding occurs, but when it cracks, faulting takes place. Faulting may be caused by tension or compression, forces which lengthen or shorten the earth's crust, causing a section of it to subside or to rise above the surrounding level. Figure 21 explain how faulting causes host or block mountains and their counterparts, graben or rift valleys. In figure 21, the earth movements generate tensional forces that tend to pull the crust apart and faults are developed. If the block enclosed B, the faults remains as it is or rises and the land on either side subsides. The upstanding block becomes the host or block mountain. The faulted edges are very steep with scarp slopes and the summit is almost level. Example, the Hansrück Mountains, the Vosges and Black Forest of the Rhineland. Tension may also cause the central portion to be let down between two adjacent fault blocks, forming a graben or rift valley, which will have steep walls. The East African Rift Valley system is 3,000 miles long, stretching from East Africa through the Red Sea out to Syria. Compressional forces set up by earth movements may produce a thrust or reverse fault and shorten the crust. A block may be raised or lowered in relation to surrounding areas. Figure 21b illustrates a rift valley formed in this way. In general, large-scale block mountains and rift valleys are due to the tension rather than compression. The faults may occur in series and be further complicated by tilting and other irregularities. Denudation through the edges modifies faulted landforms. The third one is volcanic mountains. These are in fact volcanoes which are built up from material ejected from fissures in the earth's crust. The materials include molten lava, volcanic bombs, cinders, ashes, dust, and liquid mud. They fall around the vent in successive layers, building up a characteristic volcanic cone. Volcanic mountains are often called mountains of accumulation. They are common in the circum-Pacific belt and include such volcanic peaks as Mount Fuji in Japan, Mount Meon in Philippines, Mount Merapi in Sumatra, Mount Agung in Bali, and Mount Cotopaxi in Ecuador. Further details are given in chapter 3. You can see here the picture. The fourth one is residual mountains. These are mountains evolved by denudation, where the general level of the land has been lowered by the agents of denudation. Some very resistant areas may remain and these form residual mountains. Example, Mount Monadnock in USA. Residual mountains may also evolve from plateaus which have been dissected by rivers into hills and valleys like the ones illustrated in figure 23. Here, the ridges and peaks are all very similar in height. Examples of dissected plateaus where the down-cutting streams have eroded the uplands into mountains of denudation are the highlands of Scotland, Scandinavia, and the Deccan Plateau. You can see here the figure 23. Now we are going to discuss the types of plateaus. Plateaus are elevated uplands with extensive level surfaces and usually descended steeply to the surrounding lowland. They are sometimes referred to as tablelands. Like all highlands, plateaus are subjected to erosional processes. As a result, their original characteristics may be greatly altered. According to their mode of formation and their physical appearance, plateaus may be grouped into the following types. The first one is tectonic plateau. These are formed by earth movements which cause uplift and are normally of a considerable size and fairly uniform altitude. They include continental blocks like the Deccan Plateau in India. Some of the tectonic plateaux may be tilted like the Meseta of central Iberia or faulted like the Harz of Germany. When the plateaux are enclosed by fold mountains, they are known as intermont plateaus. Examples are the Tibetan plateau between the Himalayas and the Kunlun, and the Bolivian plateau between two ranges of the Andes. Intermont plateau are some of the highest and the most extensive plateau in the world. The second one is volcanic plateau. Molten lava may issue from the Earth's crust and spread over its surface to form successive sheets of basaltic lava. These solidify to form a lava plateau. Some of the better known volcanic plateaux are the Antrim Plateau of Northern Ireland and the northwestern part of the Deccan Plateau. The most remarkable plateau built by lava is the Columbia Snake Plateau, which covers an area almost twice as big as Malaysia. Each layer of the lava flow is over 100 feet thick, and the entire depth of successive lava layers is estimated to be almost a mile. The third one is dissected plateau. Through the continual processes of weathering and erosion by running water, ice, and winds, high and extensive plateaux are gradually worn down and their surfaces made irregular. In the humid highlands, stream action and sometimes glaciation cut deep, narrow valleys in the plateau, which are then described as dissected plateau. An example in the Scottish Highlands, in rare countries, vertical corrosion by rivers and abrasion by winds will dissect the plateau into steep-sided tabular masses termed mesas and buttes. Intersected by deep canyons, this is a common feature of arid and semi-arid areas. Example, in the southwestern USA. Many of the world's plateaus have rich mineral resources and have been actively mined. The African plateau yields gold, diamonds, copper, manganese, and chromium. In the Brazilian plateau, there are huge resources of iron and manganese, particularly in the Minas Gerais area. The Deccan Plateau has deposits of manganese, coal, and iron, and the plateau of Western Australia is rich in gold and iron. Now we are going to study the types of plains. A plain is an area of lowland, either level or undulating. It seldom rises more than a few hundred feet above sea level. There may be low hills which will give a typical rolling topography. The plains usually form the best land of a country and are often intensively cultivated. Population and settlements are normally concentrated here, and when plains are traversed by rivers, as most of them are, their economic importance may be even greater. Example, the Indo-Gangetic Plain, the Mississippi Plain, and the Yangtze Plain. Some of the most extensive temperate plains are grasslands like the Russian steppes, the North American prairies, and the Argentinian pampas. Plains may be grouped into three major types based on their mode of formation. The first one is a structural plains. These are the structurally depressed areas of the world that make up some of the most extensive natural lowlands on the Earth's surface. They are formed by horizontally bedded rocks, relatively undisturbed by the crustal movements of the Earth. They include such great plains as the Russian Platform, the Great Plains of USA, and the central lowlands of Australia. The second one is depositional plains. These are plains formed by the deposition of materials brought by various agents of transportation. They are comparatively level but rise gently towards adjacent highlands. Their fertility and economic development depend greatly on the types of sediments that are laid down. Some of the largest depositional plains are due to the deposition by large rivers. Active erosion in the upper course results in the large quantities of alluvium being brought down to the lower course and deposited to form extensive alluvial plains, flood plains, and deltaic plains. They form the most productive agricultural plains of the world, intensively tilled and very densely populated. The Nile Delta of Egypt is noted for rice and cotton cultivation. The Ganges Delta for rice and jute growing, while the plain of North China, where the Huanghe has spread out a thick mantle of alluvium, supports a wide range of crops. Glaciers and ice sheets may deposit a widespread mantle of unsorted fluvio-glacial sands and gravels in the outwash plain, or may drop boulder clay, a mixture of various sizes of boulders and clay, to form a till plain or drift plain. Outwash plains are usually barren lands. Example, some parts of Holland and northern Germany, but boulder clay may be very valuable farming land. Example, the Midwest of the USA and East Anglia in England. In coastal regions, waves and winds often drive beach materials, mud, sand, or shingle, landwards and deposit them on the coastal plain to form marine swamps, mud flats, tidal and estuarine islands. Lowlands. An appreciable portion of the coastal lowlands of Belgium, the Netherlands, and the Gulf Coast of USA were formed in this way. Uplift may raise the coastal lowlands slightly and they then form an emergent coastal plain. Example, the coastal margins from Florida to Texas. Winds may blow aeolian deposits, very fine particles known as loess, from interior deserts or barren surfaces and deposit them upon hills, valleys, or plains, forming a loess plateau as in northwest China or a loess plain as in the pampas of Argentina. The loess helps to level an undulating plain by filling up grooves and depressions. Many of the loess covered plains in the world are fertile agricultural regions. There is a figure 24. The third one is erosional plains. These plains are carved by the agents of erosion. Rain, rivers, ice, and wind help to smooth out the irregularities of the Earth's surface, and in terms of millions of years, even high mountains can be reduced to low undulating plains. Such plains of denudation are described as peneplains, a word meaning almost plains. Rivers in their course from source to sea deepen their valleys and widen their banks. The projecting spurs are cut back so that the level ground bordering the river is constantly widened. At the same time, the higher land between the rivers is gradually lowered. In glaciated regions, glaciers and ice sheets spouted and leveled the land, forming ice-scarred plains. Hollows scooped out by the ice are now filled by lakes. There are extensive ice-scarred plains in northern Europe and northern Canada. Finland is estimated to have 35,000 lakes, occupying 10% of the total land surface of the country. In arid and semi-arid regions, wind deflation sweeps away much of the eroded desert materials, lowering the level of land and forming extensive plains. Example, the gravelly or stony desert plains called reg in Africa. Mechanical weathering in arid and semi-arid areas wears back the mountain slopes to leave a gently sloping pediments or plains. You can see here the figure 25. So with this our chapter ends, and now there is questions and exercises. So friends, subscribe the channel, press the bell icon for being tuned, and study well. Thank you.